and good afternoon. I have been tagged in to the Wildest Dream book tag by my friend Margaret Pinard, who is also an author. I'll leave her link below. And she was tagged in by Heather Reeds, who is also an author, who I think began these questions, so I'll tag her in below as well. And it's a set of questions about your fantasy place to read books, your fantasy bookshop, and all good things like that. So let's dive right in with the first question. What is your fantasy time and place to read a book? Okay. It's not something I've given a lot of thought to, just because I have to admit that in old age, I'm really heading more towards audiobooks nowadays, just because time in the day, you know. I'm usually listening in the morning when I'm in the shower, I'm listening at night time as I'm going to sleep, and I'm listening when I'm cooking. So anything that requires me to use my hands to do something else, I'm going to be listening to an audiobook. So I don't generally have a lot of time to sit down and read anymore. I think usually mostly I'm reading my own work whilst I'm editing through it, and that doesn't really count. So if I could pick any time and place to be reading, the first thing that comes to mind, something I think would be quite nice, would be on sort of a glass-bottomed yacht in a very calm ocean. So, you know, with a slight sea breeze, not enough to turn the pages, obviously. So where it's always just about sunset. So a beautiful red gold glowing sunset on the horizon, really calm waters, enough light to see by, enough light to read by, and a constant supply of cold drinks and cocktails. I think that would be very nice, just to sort of lie there on a comfortable sofa looking at the sunset, sipping cold drinks and reading a book. And maybe I could kind of move between that and sort of a comfortable soft bed where I could sort of just lie on that, or I could lie outside, that kind of thing, but completely alone, because there's nothing worse than trying to read a book and being interrupted or distracted. Same for writing, I find. I'm not somebody who can sit in a coffee shop and write, because I just get too kind of disturbed by everything going on around me. So yeah, I think that would be it. Yacht, sunset, cold drinks. Sounds good. Okay, next question. Your fantasy personal library. So what would your sort of personal library look like? I'm a lot like Margaret on this one. I really appreciate the sort of the old sort of wooden bookshelved libraries with the twisting staircases. I think Beauty and the Beast, where she walks into that library and she goes like, oh, I think that would be kind of my favourite sort of library. If we're talking about libraries that we could have in real life, it would definitely look something like that. But if we're talking about complete fantasy libraries, I kind of think it would be sort of cool to have sort of an underground cave where, you know, you could kind of just do this in the air and books would appear as shadows, sort of shadows and smoke, and sort of maybe sort of with the words burnt into it in like embers or something. Might be a bit hard on the eyes, might burn your eyes after a while, or maybe sort of with a pool in the middle where you could kind of pick up the water in your hands and read the book as waves, where it just sort of like the words of foam or something. You know, if we're going for a complete fantasy redo here and you could have anything, that would be kind of cool, just to be able to conjure books out of thin air, and kind of in smoke or in water and waves, and that would be kind of cool. But no, if we're talking about a fantasy library that you could plausibly actually build, then yeah, something like the Beauty and the Beast library would be great. I'd like that. Next question. Imagine you have decided to build a bookshop. What would you call it? Would it sell new or second-hand books? Would it sell anything else? What features would you want in that bookshop? Oh, that's quite a few questions, isn't it? Okay, let's begin with, imagine you have decided to build a bookshop. What would you call it? Oh gosh, that I think I'm going to have to come back to that. I'm on the spot. I can't make things up that quickly. Hold on, I'll have to think about that. But Would it sell new or secondhand books? Hands down, secondhand books. Absolutely, no questions asked. Secondhand books. I have a friend here called Carolyn, and she set up sort of Kigali's first secondhand bookshop called Patchwork. And I don't think that I could do better than she has. She's got like this beautiful setup. I did a video about it. I'll leave a link to that. But basically, it's her house, and she turned a room in her house into a secondhand bookshop. So she spent about 4 years buying up and collecting any secondhand books that she could get her hands on until she had enough to open a shop. And now people take books there. She buys secondhand books. She sells secondhand books. She'll do exchanges. And it's just absolutely beautiful because all she has to do is sort of get up in the morning and walk into her living room, and she can start selling books. So that's really nice. And she's kind of categorized them on the shelves into different sort of genres. So you've got horror, you've got non-fiction, you've got poetry, you've even got a music section now, which is great because I bought some books for my friend's music school there. So I think she's got it down. If I was going to have a secondhand bookshop, it would be a bit like that. It might be a bit more sprawling because sort of growing up, there used to be some wonderful bookshops. In Gloucester, there used to be one called Ataka's, and it was just like this never-ending sort of rooms of old dusty shelves. And I don't think very much was in order in there. You basically had to just ratchet through looking for things. So I really like that, the old kind of musty kind of, somewhere where you could find sort of an ancient occult tome in there and sort of dust it off and not realise what you bought until you got it home kind of thing. There's also, I think, Stirling Bookshop in Scotland's a bit like that. I bought absolutely gorgeous set of poetry books from there years and years and years ago, and they're absolutely beautiful. Probably, I'd say over 100 years old, you know, and that's part of it. It's quite nice when things aren't terribly ordered because you can find anything in there that you didn't know that you were looking for. So I like that kind of feeling. And there's another gorgeous bookshop called King's Bookshop in Callander where they sell local poets, so little chapbooks of local poets, which I'd really like something like that where you could showcase local writers. And they also bind old books. So if they get really, really old books that are falling apart, they'll beautifully, beautifully bind them. And that would be nice as well. That'd be a cool skill to have. So maybe it would offer a service where you could bring in books that are falling apart and they're really nicely bound and put back on the shelves for sale. The other nice thing that Carolyn does here in Kigali is she makes buttered fudge and brownies and sells coffee and tea. And whereas I wouldn't want to turn it into something crazy like a full-blown Costas or anything, it's really nice to have handmade biscuits and things, and she gives away free seeds. So basically what I'm saying is if I was going to start a secondhand bookshop, I would start Carolyn's bookshop. So as she's already done it, I don't need to. I just like to hang out there and, read books on a rainy afternoon. And as for what I call it, I might call it the same as my blog is called, which is Deckel Edged. So Deckel Edged is just the really old books that you used to get where the edging of the paper isn't straight and it's all kind of sort of uneven because it looks really rustic and kind of ye olde worldy, and I like that. So I might call it Deckel Edged. So not everything in life has to be perfectly straight and even in order to have value and meaning. Wow, that was deep. Okay, question number 4. Name one person, not a booktuber, with whom you can have a good conversation about books. A few people spring to mind. My dad, because my dad gave me quite a love of books growing up, is many, many happy hours wandering through Dillon's bookshop, which was sort of the British bookshop that mostly existed everywhere before Waterstones, and then I think they got bought out. But yeah, we'd just spend like hours wandering through the bookshop looking for books and talking about books and making up stories. So yeah, my dad, he's very much into thrillers and kind of whodunit mysteries, but reads very widely. So yeah, I have to admit, I don't tend to have many long conversations about books. The most recent conversation I had was about writing, and that was with Margaret the other day. We jumped on a Zoom and she gave me some pointers for a historical fiction piece that I was writing. I did have one very good friend called Christiane de Rosier. She was a volunteer here just after I arrived. She came sort of the following year. And she stayed in Rwanda, much like me. So I left Rwanda for a bit and then I came back and she was still here. We used to meet up and go for Chinese. And she was building an eco lodge at the time in Kibuye out on the lake. And very sadly, she died just before it opened. She got quite sick, and we used to talk about books a lot. So even when she was sick, I took her books and we'd talk about authors. And the reason that I'm talking about Christiane is because she was somebody who always was very, very supportive of my writing and liked what I was writing. The book that I was writing at the time when she passed was The Children of Lear, and she gave a lot of input into that. And yeah, we like the same kind of stories. We like quite literary stories. And we used to have some great conversations. So when she was building her eco lodge, she'd come to Kigali to shop and she'd stay at my place and sometimes cook, and we'd sit out on the porch back in the days when I was a smoker, and we'd have a cigarette and we'd have a chat and we'd talk about books and we'd talk about life. And I miss her. So she was somebody that I used to talk about books and writing with a lot, and whose opinion I do miss, because I think we had very similar ideas about writing, and it was nice to bounce things off her. Anyway, so that's somebody who I wanted to mention, because even though she's gone, I still really appreciate and remember very fondly the conversations that we had about books. And of course, Carolyn, who runs Patchwork Bookshop that I mentioned a minute ago, she's a great person to talk about books, because that's what she does all day. Every day is curate secondhand books, and she reads so many things. And so, we can sit and talk about the books that we've read. So I really appreciate Carolyn as well. But I don't have that many conversations about books nowadays. It's mostly more about pianos, because my other life is tuning and fixing pianos. So I have a lot of conversations about fixing pianos at the moment. Okay, so the last question here is, if you won $1 million, or pounds or yen or euros, and you could only spend it on books or book-related items, how would you spend it? Well, first part of that question, if you won $1 million, or pounds or yen or euros, you'd always take the pounds. It would be £1 million, right? Otherwise, on the exchange rate, you'd be losing a ton of money. Sorry, these are the things you think about when you are like an expat living not in your home country. Is how much is this money worth compared to this money? You'd always go for the £1 million there. You wouldn't go for the million anything else. But moving on from technical concerns, if I had £1 million and I could only spend it on book related stuff, what would it be? First thing that came to mind there is, in the UK, I think in London, there's a couple of barges, these long boats that go on canals, and they've turned them into floating libraries. And I really like the idea of something like that, to own a little floating library or bookshop, sorry. And that would be a nice idea, but then there are people who are already doing that, and they're doing it really well. So like, the world doesn't really need more book barges. And I don't think there's anything that I would want to blow £1 million on for myself. I might buy a nice pen or something, or I might buy like a first edition of something, but I can't think of anything that I would blow £1 million on. What I would probably do with it is to start a publishing company here in Rwanda that could compete on an international level, just because there are a lot of barriers to publishing. If you come from a developing economy such as Rwanda, you have a lot of barriers to the international market, like trying to sell on Amazon KDP you cannot get paid for your work in the same way that you can if you live in a developed economy where the banking systems work differently. I might do a different video about this if anybody's interested, but it's really hard as an independent author here to get your books out internationally and to get paid for those books or to market those books. And so even like a few years ago, the Caine Prize for African Literature held their awards ceremony here, and I was sitting thinking, it would be very, very difficult for a Rwandan author to win that prize or even to compete on that level, just because distribution internationally and marketing internationally doesn't really exist in the same way yet. And so there are a few independent publishing companies here in Rwanda who mostly do print runs and sell within Rwanda, and one or two who have bank accounts outside the country who can compete on KDP and publish and get paid. But it would be really, really nice to set up a publishing company in Rwanda where the authors are paid fairly for what they are producing, and where you could then invest in a bit of marketing just to get the books out there and seen by an international market. And I don't think £1 million would quite get you all the way there, but it would really be a fantastic start. So yeah, I think maybe set up a publishing company here focused on the international market with a little bit of a marketing budget behind it would be quite good fun. Yeah, that's what I do with it. So yeah, those are my answers to the Wildest Dreams book tag. I don't know who to tag in on this because I don't know if I've got many author followers on here. But if you are an author or a writer and you would like to participate in this, do your own video with your answers to these questions. I'll leave them below, and then drop me a link in the comments to your response, and then hopefully we can build up some replies. Yeah, all right.